So we have Karen Valente. It's pretty good?
Yeah.
All right. She's the owner and founder of Made Here in New York. Do you want to explain to me what Made Here does?
Hi, can you guys hear me? Okay. I make sweaters and blankets in the New York metropolitan area. I use yarn that's grown in the United States. Sometimes I use upcycled yarn, which is lucky if I can get my hands on it, which is good because sometimes mills would have 200 pounds that a big company can't use, but I can use. I try to knit everything sustainably. I try to knit everything sustainably. For instance, the sweater is knit body size, so there's no waste. That's it, everything's made here, and that's my main goal. And I try to source the yarn sustainably and ethically as well. So Pima cotton I use is Ecotech certified yarn, that's better. Ecotech certified, Indians cotton certified, etc.
Awesome.
We're going to be doing this a lot.
No, we're going to be sharing it here. It's good. And so next we have Christopher Williams over at Union Surfboards. You want to explain what does Union Surfboards do?
Is this thing working?
No, so we might have to all
Union Surfboards is a surfboard company based in Brooklyn. Union Surfboards is a surfboard company based in Brooklyn. We make primarily just surfboards, but we will be releasing a men's line as well this spring and summer. It was making surfboards. It was sort of just a personal passion. I made my own surfboards for a while when I was living in California, and yeah, moved here and started a business. I guess just selling surfboards to friends, and I went on and took some time to build a brand around it. But yeah, that's what we do.
And not last, but Richie Siegel. Thank you so much for making it out here on such short notice. I'm not even sure what title you really want to go under. Award-winning filmmaker, photographer, designer, and writer. Which one do you favor the most?
Just the owner of the item store. Nice project, does that work? Okay.
All right.
Yeah, that was kind of the old title. But for the last year or so, I was working on a menswear line called Even to New York. It was all made here. We never really looked anywhere else but making it here. And it was kind of like minimalist, kind of high-end menswear. Selling mostly online, a little bit in retail too. And yeah, about a year and a quarter into it.
Kevin Ceruzzi, we've been bumping into one another for probably the past couple of years on various panels and events. Want to give us your rundown?
Hello. Okay. Yes, my name is Kevin Ceruzzi. I have my own men's outerwear brand. It's based here. I make high quality, upscale, casual men's outerwear. Use fabrics such as neoprene, lambskin leather, wool coating, and glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So just want to start this free-form Q&A and just get to know why you guys started making it America. What was the impetus for it? Have you guys ever produced overseas? Where did you start out? Anyone want to start off with that?
I designed sweaters years ago, and I did imports as well as domestic. And I wanted to always do domestic because I really enjoy the fact that you can see the sweater knitting down the machine. You can change the color right down the spot. Usually if you're working with the Orient, you're talking to an agent who does the project for you, it comes wrong, it comes right, a lot of back and forth. So if you're in the knitting mill, you can see how it comes out right away. And then I basically retired. So my daughter challenged me to go back and make sweaters again, and I said, honey, there's no knitting mills left anymore, and anybody I knew who was designing imports. The knitting mills that I did know were out of business. So now she got my feather, she got my fire going up, and I pounded and paved, made a lot of phone calls, and I found knitting mills. It was organic, it kind of just grew. I her friends with Instagram pictures. I put quotes of famous New York women on the sweaters. And I'm like, right now, it's a lot of fun. And it is really a fun process, but that's the part I enjoy most. Pretty much everything is at your fingertips. Good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the reason that we make all of our stuff here in the States, in Brooklyn, isn't necessarily by choice. We source the foam that goes into our surfboards from domestic companies. I think they manufacture some of those materials overseas, but the benefit to us of having relationships with businesses or partners in the States, or at least the Northeast, is that we have a much greater level of control over the quality of the work. And it's also just, it's I think, for me in part, something that I enjoy about our business is developing relationships with the people that are in the surf communities, especially in the Northeast, because they're so close and we share kind of the same hardships that surfboard manufacturers on the West Coast don't experience, because they have such materials and everything are so accessible out there, because obviously the surf industry in California is much greater than the surf industry on the East Coast. But yeah, so for me, it's just been a real joy, I think, developing a relationship with the people that we work with, which are all close by. And yeah, just having great quality assurance, I think, over how the products are made and stuff like that. That's what we really enjoy about making our stuff domestically.
And you're the second generation, right? Your father used to be a woodworker.
Yeah, my father was a woodworker. The skills that I took away from having spent time in his workshop back home don't really apply to the ones that I employ today, shaping polyurethane foam surfboards. Wood obviously is very different when you're working with it than foam is. We use completely different tools. But yeah, I think that I was always certainly inspired to do something where I was working with my hands as a result of seeing my father do the same thing with wood.
Yeah, I'm just gonna talk to you. I think, yeah, like you said, I think that it comes down to.
Can everyone hear?
Can you hear me? No.
Use the mic. I think for producing New York, it comes down to really two things. One of which you touched on, which is control, and the other which is kind of learning. And they're pretty closely related. If you don't know what's kind of going on in the time your stuff is getting made, it's like really hard to learn how it all works. And so what we found is kind of the fastest way to learn is to literally just stand there and watch and be involved in the process and ask a ton of questions and be a little annoying, but kind of just be a sponge in a way. And it's really hard to do if it's even in Los Angeles if you're in New York, like anywhere outside of where you can actually go is really hard. And so we produced in New York about 8 months, and for some cost issues, we tried to produce in LA for 2 months, and it was the worst time in the business because you're shipping things back and forth, you don't see anything, you're just being like, there's a guy on the phone telling you like, yeah, it's going really well, but like, where is it? You don't really know. And so being physically present was like, we basically went to, we had never done this before, and we basically went to like probably a 4-year fashion college in about 4 months by just physically being present and just kind of soaking up all we could. And so it was really a no-brainer. And it's really, really hard to do it for the first time too, with an agent or with someone else kind of abroad, because you just have nothing to latch onto.
Yeah, I love making everything in New York. It's like a blessing, especially with the economy and everyone was in China, now is moving away from China. But to be able to support Made in New York is pretty important to me. And at the same time, my brand is also about being affordable luxury with my high-end outerwear, and I always use high-quality materials. It's great that I can still have it affordable compared to other high-end luxury brands, and it's made in New York. helping the people, helping the economy. I really enjoy doing that. How I got started was took a long time. I had to intern for many places. I went to night classes at FIT for a couple of years, and then I even worked at luxury clothing stores like Burberry, Armani. But just to just always persevering, because no matter how hard it takes, just keep on being persistent. That's just what it is about a small business. Any endeavor you want to go to. So doing that and be able to have things made in New York and represent New York is a great feeling. Yeah.
It's really interesting. There's an overlap between how everyone starts producing in America. It's, maybe you take different paths, but we all end up in the same place. I used to produce my own watch line overseas for probably 3 years. Third year, I started getting into department stores. The first department store order came back botched. So I lost about $20,000 on that one particular order. So in order to fix that, I had to go to an American manufacturer because the leather was so terrible. So I found a leather manufacturer, and then I found basically through the Yellow Pages. You know, I'm not embarrassed, I'll say it. It's the Yellow Pages. There are so very few resources to find these guys. But eventually, once I found them, just the relationship. I think that's the overlapping element of having someone that's closer to you, even when they're on the other coast, where you can call these guys. Like I'm waking up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning to handle correspondence online. There is no phone call, but I've recognized that it's a balance. So there's pros and cons of switching up from going overseas to going domestic. Are there any sort of would you say sacrifices that you guys have made? And at what cost? I mean, I would hate for this to be like everything made in America is like so much better than overseas. Like I don't think that it's just the fact that manufacturers overseas are not trying to do a good job. There's just some inherent benefits to domestic production. Do you guys want to share any of those choices that you guys made? Some variables that you're weighing? Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the biggest cost is the cost, right? Like, it is immensely expensive to produce in America, and even probably 40% more to produce in New York than it would be in LA. And so that has serious implications on your pricing and on your business, and the quality in New York can be really, really good. I think there's a question of if consumers, or to what level consumers care about that quality. And I think there are a lot of brands here, and ours that we try to pitch it early on, this is really, really good quality stuff. And I think there are a lot of people that don't, just as long as it's good enough, that's good for them. But yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard to find a brand that makes their stuff in New York that is not below a contemporary price point, because it's really hard to run a business like that. And so I think whether it's yours or ours or any of ours, these tend to be higher end businesses because the other option, which I saw Steve Allen came and talked at some point, and he basically was like, you just can't expect to make any money in the first 3 years of a business, a fashion business that makes stuff in New York, if you're trying to really, really compete on price and become a super accessible brand. So it kind of pushes the brands up to the not accessible, and that has kind of implications on the business.
Yeah, honestly, maybe it might be better if you were mass market to do something overseas. It might be beneficial seeking costs. If you're doing something contemporary or higher, luxury, maybe it would be better to do something locally. With mass market, the quality, like he said, might not be as good, but if you're making mass market type of things, it's not really a high-end product most of the time. And you're saving a lot of cost, it's quicker to get done most of the time. But if you're doing anything else, I would definitely say do local in America. You can find a good cost. I remember when I was trying to find a place, it took so long. I was trying to find somewhere in New York. I literally was searching for about 3 months, and this was through online searching and just knocking on doors. But I finally found one that I still use today, and it's great price, great quality. So I think if you're doing anything that is at least mid-level or higher, definitely do it locally, get a good price, help out the economy, represent your area, and the people will like it too. You know, people definitely respond better to something made in America than in another country.
All right, yeah, that's one of the things that I found. I think most of my peers started producing overseas, understanding that a lot of the price points, especially given certain industries within watches, you have to produce overseas because all the parts are overseas pretty much. There's only two places really in the world that you can find the hands, the glass, the straps, all the different components, and that's primarily overseas for a certain price point. One of the things that I found domestically was that while the price per unit might be higher higher domestically, the minimum order quantities were significantly lower. And that ultimately kept me from holding inventory in my apartment. So I still have watches, I always say this, I still have watches, I'm gonna make this my Twitter. I still have watches in my closet that I have not sold yet, but I can't bring myself to throw them away. And so it's a constant reminder of it's not always just the upfront ticket value. And I've come to find that over the past 3 years, the price of production of those watches has skyrocketed. It's over 4 times the original price that I was paying per unit. I just do it for shits and giggles, just to see what the price is, like from year to year, but it's amazing how the prices have skyrocketed. But that on top of the minimum order quantities really was prohibitive for me in producing more and more products. So that was a sacrifice for me. But I wanted to figure out from you guys, like the relationship, how valuable has those relationships been? How do you leverage those one relationship to another? I was able to find multiple manufacturers through one guy. He was able to, usually they'll tell you other guys that are not competitive to them. So how has that network effect been able to help you grow your business?
Well, I think for me making surfboards, the example is a little bit different. I'm not manufacturing clothing overseas, but I think the logistics perspective is a lot that goes into making a single surfboard. We get our foam blanks from a company called Arctic Foam, who has a warehouse in Mexico. Their office is based in Florida, and the blanks are obviously sent from Mexico to Florida. We have them cut on a CNC machine, pre-cut on a CNC machine, which basically I designed my surfboard with CAD software, and then a CNC machine mills the board to what I've designed on the computer, and then the boards are, after they've been built, sent to me where I finish them by hand to require some fine tuning, and then the boards are sent off to our fiberglasser, who's based in Gloucester, Massachusetts. So it's to say that a single surfboard, that we make covers quite a bit of geographic distance before it turns into a final product. And our fiberglasser in Gloucester is an older guy than I am, and has been in the industry for about 15 years, and has built a very wide network around him that has been massively helpful for us in terms of being able to find and source all of the different materials when I'm still relatively new to the industry myself. I was more of a hobbyist making my own surfboards, and when we started the company, we needed to build those relationships, but being new, we didn't have any work. And this guy has enabled us just through, and he's done it because we've developed a good relationship. He's really helped in terms of just simplifying all the logistics for us. So instead of me having to call the blank company, the foam manufacturer, and having them ship blanks out and cutting boards on a CNC machine and this and that, him having that network, he's owned the responsibility of managing our logistics, which is a dependency that I'm almost afraid of, but at the same time, I fall back on, the strength of our relationship. And yeah, for us, the materials that he's helped us source, and the work he's done from a logistics perspective has benefited us massively. So yeah, I think that it's important just to, develop those relationships, I guess.
I don't know if you did this on purpose or if it was accidental that it just kind of slipped, but you actually mentioned the factory name. And most people don't mention factory names, or much less the location of these factories. Why do you feel comfortable doing that? Because I usually find that a lot of entrepreneurs, especially earlier out, don't ask me. It's completely taboo to talk about where these products are made.
Yeah, I'm not really afraid of stuff like that, I guess. Never have been, at least from a business perspective. I don't hold stuff too close to my chest, when it comes to, blank manufacturers, there's only a handful for you to choose from to begin with, two really primary ones. So for somebody, somebody could look at our surfboards and know, as long as they've been around the industry for a little while, know where we get our foam blanks. So, I don't think that we're giving up any competitive advantage by revealing, who we work with, who our partners are, where we source the materials from. Because without the relationship that I have with my class, or that somebody else would also need to have in order to source some of these things, won't exist for them at first. And yeah, I've just never really been too worried about it, I guess.
This is part of surf culture, probably, just kind of hanging loose a little bit.
No, definitely. There's some guys out on Long Island that make surfboards that we've developed a relationship with. That probably wouldn't reveal where they get their blanks to an audience, perhaps. But yeah, it's just never been a major concern of mine, I guess.
Yeah, I think too, specifically in the garment world, there's something where you hit the point where you're kind of on the inside, and it's not as much as a status thing as much as more of a respect thing of I go to my factory, I'm walking around and there's stuff from a bunch of brands that everyone's heard of just sitting there in kind of half-baked form. And it's just kind of a thing of we don't talk about this outside of the shop. You don't really ask them about it. You don't go, tell your friends look, this collection from whatever brand is coming out in 6 months, and it's really, either it's great or it's crap or whatever. It just kind of exists because your stuff is there too, and everyone there's a really weird level of transparency kind of in these factories because they're working. You can't really build garments in private, even within the factory. And so we'll go to a place and there's 300 pieces of theory just sitting there in kind of mid-form, and it's fine, and it kind of stays on the inside. With kind of to the factories on the same sense, you kind of just hit this point where some people just start telling you, and there's no metric or point or whatever, but if you can kind of gain, we always operate by just surrounding ourselves with as many people that have done this before us as we could, because there's no book about this. There's nothing you can read. There's nothing classes you can go to. You have to do it, and you have to mess it up a lot, and then just mess it up less and less and less as you kind of move along. And one of the ways to get around it is to talk to people who have done it before you and not kind of go in blind. And if you can find those people, they will start to just tell you that, here's my factory, go use them, because at the end of the day, there's a lot, there are a lot of, kind of, you were talking a lot about the economy, but there are a lot of issues around factories and getting paid on time. They're running really, really hard businesses too, because as you go down the chain, there's just less and less money. You start with materials, and then the factory, and the brand, and the stores, and everyone's running a hard business. And so if one of your mentors or friends or whatever can recommend a place that will keep them in business for both of you, they're going to do that at the end of the day if they trust you. But it's kind of that thing that kind of happens kind of quietly, and there's no one running around kind of screaming out where they do, but people are usually pretty open about it if you can kind of gain the respect and the trust of them.
I'm going to stop Callie from leaping over the next row and attacking you, because we do actually have that information that we publish, so we're trying to build that sort of knowledge base to start a company, so got you.
I'm helping.
Cool, did you want to add anything to that?
It's great. what you're saying, how your factories pretty much are your partners. So in the sweater industry, interestingly, you're talking about price. When I first got back into the industry and found out who was left, they were knitting, sorry, I'm a fiber snob, they're knitting acrylic, and I just don't like acrylic, and it was mass market, whatever, and but the reason that they probably survived was because they were doing big orders in acrylic, and acrylic, you don't have to wash it, you just steam it, you can stretch it out, you can meet the measurements, great. So naturally the first knitting mill that I had gone to replicate a stitch that I had done long ago, he said, oh, okay, I don't want to knit cotton. I go, come on, you have probably a great library. I can just put some cotton up in a great stitch, would be great. A basic cotton sweater and a great stitch, what's not to love? Oh, I don't want to do it, but I have some cotton. So then I went to the next guy and he said, I'll develop a stitch for you, and then he goes, now I need some cotton. So now as I've been sourcing cotton, the minimums are high. So as I've gone to mills and finishers, I've been introduced to other manufacturers like myself who can collaborate on a yarn order, perhaps. So that's what's kind of cool to me, because now I have the finishers ask me, Karen, where'd you get your yarn from? Okay, I got it in North Carolina. I went on a trip to North Carolina also to source yarn because I didn't want to be that person on the phone. Yeah, I really only want to buy this quantity, and I wanted to have, 6 TPIs and the whole bit. So I had to go down and meet them, and it really helped a lot, because now they know I know who I'm talking to, they know who they're talking to. It makes a big difference. I'm talking in circles, sorry. Everybody next?
Sure. I think that for the purposes of this conversation, the takeaway is that it's my belief, my opinion, that you stand to gain more by being transparent and speaking candidly with people, rather than being afraid or trying to keep whatever trade secrets you have secret, because you're winning over the trust of other people. For the same reasons, it sounds like everyone can speak to. You'll never know really, I guess, when an opportunity will just come out of you being genuine about what's going on and forthright. I think that if there's something that's truly secret and valuable to your business, once you become a developed business, that's different. But in the early stages of building a business, I think transparency and revealing whatever relationships or secrets you might have will probably benefit you more.
Yeah, and I want to add back to the importance of developing relationships. That is just so key and important. It doesn't matter what industry or what business you start. There's a saying that says, keeping in contact with people is like watering plants. Don't do too much of it, don't do too little of it. It sounds corny, but it's really true. I don't know how many times I have benefited just from keeping in contact with people who I didn't think I was going to work with, I did not work with ever, just like with Esquire magazine. I found the editor's phone number and I kept on contacting him early this year. He couldn't meet me, he could not meet me. Finally, there was a contest for new men's designers. I applied, and although I didn't win, he still wanted to meet me, and we met, late in the summer. He gave me good feedback on my stuff, he liked my stuff, and he gave me a couple pointers too as well. And he said, your next collection, I want to see that too. And then going back to with manufacturing and factories, I had somewhere I was working in Panama, and then now I just do everything in a factory called Friendly NY Fashion. It's between Little Italy and Chinatown. And now, even though I'm getting a little bit more orders, it's still not enough for me to go back to do it in Panama for those high production. But I still need another factory just to keep things going. And just because I've been keeping in contact with another gentleman from the garment district, I've been just every month we would just say hi to each other or just update him on what's going on with me. Now he's ready to take on. Now he's ready to take on my other products and other production, which I would have been in a jam and I would have had to start knocking on 50 doors if I didn't keep in contact with him. It's just so many examples. It just doesn't matter if you're in whatever business you're in, whatever industry, just keep in contact with people that are good. You never know just what will come out of it.
Awesome. A lot of sharing, a lot of giving. It's awesome. I feel very warm there. Can we just do one shot down before we just open this up? I'm really happy we have such a big audience. I'd love to kind of get some questions going in QA. But first, let's share one secret, one part of the underbelly, something that you might not see if you had not started your business. I'm going to start with something. And judge not, please. Let's not judge. This is a judgment-free zone up here. One thing that I found like starting out was that a lot of designers, some factories might just look for you to, if you don't know what you're doing, you might purchase something from a store, bring it to the factory, and let them know what you like and what you don't like, and they'll use that as a model to develop a prototype, and you can continue altering from there. One of the things that I've experienced in that is that there's some designers that have gone to the factory, and I understand that some samples you're not supposed to talk about. It's just something where you just pass those things by. I don't see that. But there's some conversations that some designers have around, hey, how much does something like that cost? And so that's been a way that I've seen a lot of designers start. You develop your ideas off of pre-existing ideas. This is how most of these larger companies that I've designed for have done. Like, I've gone out to Macy's, I got a card from them, and then I was able to buy out whatever watches I felt like fit a collection, and then we make it X brand. So let's keep it going from there. I kind of made it how you gotta get it.
I don't really have any secrets. I'm so transparent. Yeah, definitely. Every company will go to Missoni or Chanel or one, a brand that costs like a $700 sweater and tweak it down to be a $100 version. It's not like I'm professing to reinvent the wheel, for sure. I just like cotton sweaters. I want to make beautiful cotton sweaters. And I guess that's a secret.
Yeah, I think that I would just echo your example there, Matt. I think that we've taken a lot of inspiration from pre-existing products, surfboards that I've had over the years. The surfboards that we make today are a reflection of all of those boards, for sure. And yeah, I think that when a new surfboard design is unveiled to the marketplace that interests me, or I think that fills a spot in our line of surfboards that might be vacant. I've gone as far as buying that product just so I can look at it and analyze it, and take away certain things that I liked about it and apply them to our own surfboards. So.
Honest man. Richie, make it happen.
Yeah.
I think the biggest secret is that you have to snoop around the factory. Snoop around the factory. So the way to look at it is that a factory is like kind of like a giant puzzle that's just been entirely disassembled, and there are all these little things lurking there that are super helpful. So, like when we go to our factory, we look at like all the shipping labels on the boxes and see where the suppliers are. Like we'll look at the rolls of fabric and like see where it's coming from, and it all just happens. Like the analogy is that like there's an offline maker's row just sitting in every factory, and you have to just put the pieces together. And so, we found suppliers from looking at shipping labels, I'll Google it, I'll trace it back, find if they don't contact them. We found really good like button places from looking at a box of buttons and checking the label and going back. There are all these little clues just like sitting there, and you just kind of got to look around. And what you find is the factories that are like watching over you and tell you not to do it, you don't want to work with anyway, because if they're focused on you, they're not focusing on their like actual job. And so the really good ones are really focused on the work, and you can kind of just like spend a lot of time looking around their factories and find like really, really good stuff that you won't find walking in the garment district. hard to find on Google, sometimes hard to find on Makers Row because they're just not, I was talking to Kylie about this before, there's some places that just don't want to be known. But a really, really good way to find them is just to from the source kind of it. So if you work in factories that have more, bigger brands than you, which you always will, look where they're getting it from because you often can kind of just tap into it. Just keep your eyes peeled.
Richie, I see you looking at a cork board with all these pictures pinned up, just sipping on coffee. You're playing the sleuth. That's pretty awesome.
But so it's not design. We're not looking at design. We're not looking at designs or looking at copy. It's purely for sources of things. So someone could go in I'm just going to copy all the samples on the rack, right? That's not of interest to us. It's more where is the thing from, and how can we reassemble the puzzle for us.
And that's cool. It's a judgment-free zone.
Yeah, it has to do a lot with snooping around and searching. It really does. And we go back to about developing relationships, but also about searching and networking. I don't know if this is a secret, but one of the fabric suppliers I work with now is directly from Italy and at a very minimal cost. I mean, each yard is about $10 to $25 a yard, which, for any high quality fabric, it's amazing. It's usually $30, $50. It's hundreds of dollars for cashmere, But this is directly from Italy. It's stuff like rain-resistant wool. It's different layers of neoprene. They could do any print, any color of the print. And this was just from snooping around, developing relationships. I was searching for months for a good fabric supply. I was mainly just using warehouses and things like that, but they have minimums, as you know, about 50, 100-yard minimums. So I kept on searching for months, and finally I found somebody online, but we didn't meet right away. We just kept in contact here and there. We both got busy. She was supplying fabric to people like Neil Barrett, Yigal Azuela, Todd Snipe, Michael Ashton. So I really wanted to work with her. So I just kept in contact maybe every few days, every week. We just send a message, And finally we met up. And now, I'm working with her, able to get these amazing fabrics from these such low prices, straight from Italy. And it's just from searching, not giving up and searching, networking, developing, keeping in contact with the people, and being persistent.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's also one thing that's great about walking around a knitting mill or any factory for that matter. If you're trying to get something sewn a certain way or something made a certain way, and you don't have a sample and you want to explain it, you might need to buy that surfboard. You might need to buy that coat that you just to show them, no, I want you to do it this way. And sometimes you can bring a factory's quality up just by doing that.
Yeah, and that's what I found as well. Because when you bring some of the samples in, sometimes it hurts because they might not know how it's constructed and they might have to cut it open. So you bought it because it's not can you sew that back so I can take it back to the store? It's just not going to be the same. So that's interesting. Let's open the questions up to the audience. Are there any questions? Okay, great.
So when you were asking about, or when there was a discussion about telling or talking about who the factory is, Richie actually was shaking his head, so kind of not really fully believing that having a fully transparent catalog of factories is really the right thing. So I just wanted to dig in a little bit deeper on that. Only because a lot of people still don't tell me who their factories are. And a lot of them are finding them on Makers Row, so they're not telling me there probably still people out there, so I just wanted to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah, so I was talking about this before with someone, but we found that our best factories, we can tell people who they are, but they're actually the ones that have the leverage to just say we don't want to work with you. And so there are two sides to this. The first is when you start out, everyone is going to say we're too busy, we don't have time, whatever. It's kind of all talk, and busy is entirely relative to just how much effort they want to put in and how much room they can make. Every factory, if they're doing well, is busy, but it doesn't actually mean that they can't work with you. So persistence and following up and just not leaving. Sometimes there's one will just get them to change their mind. But so the factory we work with now is probably has six sewers, is run by a dad and a son. They're like at capacity, which take it for what you want, but so when we first started, we would walk into these factories being like, hey, we're trying to do this, this, and this, all like, you know, big eyes and everything. And a lot of places would say, hey, we don't want to work with you, or we're not the right fit, whatever. It's super interesting now on the other side of it, when we're in a meeting with our factory, and someone, you know, who we're now a year and a half in, someone who's like a week in comes in, all big eyes about it, and they just say, you know, it's like, sorry, we're just not going to help you. And it's not as much as they're being rude about it, it's just a lot of these factories have leverage, and they can just say that. So I could tell you, I'm happy to tell you who they are. They likely would say that, you know, we're fine, we don't need it, because what you find is that the factories that do really, really well have about 5 brands that they work with entirely, and that's it. It's somewhat hard for emerging designers because, you know, not everyone can pay on time. It's a lot of individual work, and so there's a balance that they're trying to have. It's less so like me sharing with the audience or you than it is like I know what they're going to say, and getting past that is possible, but it's like really, really hard in the beginning at least. And so this factory we found that I'm talking about, we found a year in the process, and so that was a year of jumping between like 5 different factories probably, just because that's kind of awesome.
It is interesting. It sometimes does feel like an audition. I had to show my website that I had produced those products to kind of like let them know that I was going to be willing to ramp up on the. I know the factory that you work with. I know I have to. Is it? It's Black Anchor.
No.
No?
It's unknown.
Okay.
Like I just know the guys. Like I don't even know their name. It's like I know the dude's name.
Okay.
Right. It's just yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I think just like a final thought on what I was saying about revealing all your trade secrets. I think there's just a difference between a small company, a company that's still growing, hasn't really made it yet necessarily, versus a company revealing their trade secrets if they're a development company and they've got their entire production cycle in place. They're committed to their manufacturers and partners. But if you're a developing company, what do you really stand to lose? You don't have anything yet. So chances are you're probably going to pivot and change manufacturer time and time again. So revealing that information, I think it's only going to benefit you versus really cost.
We are so different. We are so different.
Right.
Any questions? Yeah.
Thank you all. A question that I have is, can you talk a little bit about the transition from passion, being a hobbyist, as you mentioned, to actually the decision and implementation of your business? How do you maintain the creativity and the heart that drove you to begin with?
It's just a lot of hard work and sacrifice. I mean, as obvious as it sounds, it really is. I started out actually going to business college. I have an Asian mother, so I better be a doctor, a lawyer, or something like that. But ever since I was a child, I had a strong passion for fashion. I remember about 9, 10 years old, I would just offer my parents to go buy groceries, so just so I could dress up and style my hair and just show the world, you know, my style. I was
the grocery store.
Even to the grocery store. And then from there, I was lucky also to have mentors. I mean, I think a mentor is huge too, especially if you're starting on your own or starting like your own business and you endeavor. When I was about to graduate business college and I was about to go pursue my MBA, I met my best friend, Andre Hatchett, and he's an entrepreneur. He has like a few businesses and he's a real estate broker. But anyway, I had a life-changing dinner with him. At that dinner, right before I was going to graduate, you know, he just told me, just start your own fashion business. And I was just in shock. I didn't know what the hell he was talking about, but he was serious. And you know what, by the end of the night, I decided this is what I'm going to do, and it's going to be all right. And I'm going to finish this. So, and then from there, it was just, like I said, a whole bunch of sacrifice and hard work. I started taking night classes at FIT for a couple of years. Then I just started interning at the same time during the day, part-time, for no money, even though I had jobs and even though I got a business degree. Interning for free at Zach Posen, at Marissa Webb, a couple other places. And then on my days off, I would work at a luxury clothing store part-time just to make some income to pay my rent and to save a little on the side, start making my samples. Start making samples, just network any way possible. Is also networking. One day this girl just took a shot of me, a photo shot of me while I was outside the FIT, and I just went up to her, and I didn't even know her, I didn't know what she was about. I just said, hey, I just started into fashion, and I want to do anything just so I can learn and help. And she said, you know what? I have a photo shoot this Saturday. Why don't you assist me? I'm the stylist. I did that, and meeting the photographer at that photo shoot, he quickly had his own magazine, which he threw in an event for, and he asked me to have my fashion show at that magazine. And that was my first fashion show, just from, that one little networking that I did. And now it's like 5 years later. There's still a lot of hard work to go, but I've been selected, and I have been, my jacket has been in the Macy's fashion show. I've been in Mod magazine. A lot of other stuff that's happened, but it's just from all this networking and this sacrifice and hard work, and then, like I said, a mentor. And you really go hard at it, that's going to happen.
I want to try to get as many questions as we can in, so we're going to go on.
Not to belabor the manufacturing point, but when you were talking about how when you go to the manufacturers, they say no, they say no, they say no, and you had mentioned you have to show your website to kind of get over that hurdle. Is it just a website, or is it persistence, or what's kind of the tipping point when the no becomes the yes?
Don't take no for an
Yeah, there's no formula for it. It's just like, I don't know. I've approached this entire kind of industry, whatever. It's just a giant puzzle, and there are all these little things you got to put together, and there is no plan, there is no recipe for it. But yeah, it could be as simple as just persistence. It could be as simple as showing them you're serious, so that you can hold a conversation with them that gets like somewhat technical. It's just like you I don't know, you kind of have to give a shit 5 times more than everyone else they're working with, and they're going to be like, oh, okay, And then the other thing too, which is very real, is like you got to pay on time early on too, because the second you start slipping, they'll just move on, or ignore you, whatever. But a lot of it is just like being present and just like not letting them go, and just telling them I'm gonna produce here, and then just work your way backwards to that. If you accept that you're going to, and then just figure out how to get it done.
I almost viewed this as a job interview. I actually kind of dressed up a little bit to go to the factory, just because I knew that it's caring about the way that you're presenting.
Yeah, or just not looking like you literally walked in off the street, which is often what you did. But I mean, this is a game of like perceptions, right? And there's so many ways you can work with those and game them, however you want to do that, but just make them think you're serious, your people behind you.
It's a good idea, because I've spent some time in the garment districts and the factories, and I always wondered, I've spent some time in the factories and the garment districts, and I always wonder, is a suit too much? Is it too pretentious? Because it is kind of like a very, not laid back environment, but it's a factory. So you're saying the suit is a good idea.
I can't tell you how many 9-to-5ers are going to these factories midday at lunch, and there's so many doctors and dentists that have been to a lot of the factories that I produced at, and they know that you have money. So if you're able to purchase the samples and you're showing that you have intent to actually grow the business, it's all just, it layers on top of that.
Sorry. It also helps that you know your stuff when you go into the factory. You can't just be like, I want to make a sweater with 3 arms and, fringes all over the place. You have to really go to school. You have to know what you're talking about. It does, it's like, what do you call it? Paying your dues type of thing. You really have to know your stuff, and when you talk to them in their same language, they respect that.
Hi, there's a problem in the industry of overproduction and the stock that retailers have and designers have, simple sales. What do you see the future of resolving this issue, and what about pre-order and customization?
Guys?
Yeah, so stock is the scariest part of this. So like when we started, we would ship out of my apartment, and I would wake up every morning and stare at our stock. And there is nothing more motivated than seeing basically just rotten money sitting there, like literally rotting, because every day that you don't sell it, it's older, and like this world changes fast, and you can't kind of sit. And so there are a lot of like structural things you can, like we try to think about early on about how do we keep that rotting for the least amount of time. Like domestic production is actually really good for this because their turnaround times are pretty quick, and so if you have the right place, you can get something turned from kind of like idea to product in maybe 9 weeks, which is like pretty good. And so there's a lot you can kind of do there, but like there may be 15 or 20 steps in the process, and so like every day adds up and adds up and adds up. But I don't know. I think domestic production is probably the future of both customization and fast turnaround times. But it's a really hard thing because the second someone puts $1 down, they want their thing pretty fast. Like instant gratification is like very real, and every day you start to delay this, like you're losing trust, and you're going to get emails being like, "Where's my stuff?" Like there's just mentality that we need it now, and you're kind of working against that. So pre-orders and stuff like that can work. It's not easy, but from my perspective, the best thing to do is just to make your cycle, like from idea to finished product, as quick as possible, and it kind of it'll save you in a lot of different areas.
My 2 cents from that is I stayed away from customization unless you had a huge order and you were able to put down something substantial in order to, because I had another order. Christmas was a terrible season for me when I was a business owner because one particular company wanted me to do blanks of a specific watch. And so I made that watch. It was a dog tag watch. So I made blanks, and they were going to have laser engraved, and then they ultimately said they didn't want it. And I placed the order overseas once again. So that was terrible for me. But domestically, I agree with you. Like, I thought the turnaround time was fantastic. I was able to get my sample sometimes the same day. I put the order in first thing in the morning, which I beat everyone else in there, and then by noon, I'll just go to the local Dunkin' Donuts, come back, and then pick up my sample, and it was just done that quickly. And my minimums were a dozen.
Just another note on that. So we're a custom support company. We make everything from scratch per order. I think we're not the only custom surfboard company out there. Most surfboard companies allow people to buy custom items, but the turnaround time is usually the thing that drives somebody towards buying something off the rack versus going the custom route, right? I think the way that you resolve that is by just trying to change the business model, which is what we've been trying to do. Like I was saying before, we get our blanks from a company in Florida, and we have a class in Massachusetts, and here we are in Brooklyn, so we're all of it is kind of spread apart. But if you can figure out a way to bring everything under one roof, what would be, what is a 4-week turnaround time for a surfboard today, which is actually twice as fast as what the other big surfboard manufacturers out there can do. Yeah, it's just a matter of, I guess, bringing it under one roof. You can turn the whole thing around in a matter of days. So as long as you have the resources and the capital, I guess, to rent the type of space that you would need to accommodate all the additional things that you're going to have under your roof, is something that we want to do in the future, certainly, but is difficult to do without having just the capital and the resources to do it. But I'm a big believer in the custom model personally. I think that it's just a new business model that we're seeing more and more these days across the board, even down into fashion, where you can buy custom Nikes and go online and configure it. So yeah, we're going that route, but people do spend their money and they expect the product pretty quickly. So as long as you manage their expectations under that business model, then it shouldn't upset people too much.
Hi, I'm the owner of Papa Plus. It's an online boutique for plus size girls. And selling wholesale, but we're trying to branch into private label, and we're having the biggest challenge finding someone who wants to even bother. So what's your advice for niche areas? I know plus size patterns might be a little difficult. It's a different customer. It's not mainstream. And we're just having a hard time finding someone to even make a sample. So just throwing it out there for any other niche business that you can give advice for. Thanks.
Sorry, so you're asking on the production side having trouble? I don't know. What have been their objection? What's the biggest thing that you run into that stops the process?
Well, we're still trying to find someone to make, and from we walk in the door, it's like, plus size. I mean, I hate to say it, but that's been my general, and so that worries me, so I'm not sure if I want to work with that person, because as you said earlier, you want someone to be somewhat, not even excited, but interested in what you're trying to do. Plus size patterns do demand a little bit more, and so I'm just having the hardest time.
Yeah, I think it is a red flag if they don't show interest right away. I wouldn't. You really can't change that. You can try and convince them, but it's definitely an uphill battle. I'm trying to think. I think part of it is maybe it's pitching it differently. Maybe it's you have to compensate a little more for the things that scare them, which are I'll put a 50% deposit down up front, or just try and game the system a bit that way, just to get them over that fear. That's really unfortunate, because part of it just is a new business in general, but it seems like there's just I don't know. I could make a size small jacket that is 100 times more complicated than a normal plus size thing, because technically it's not that different. And so I would just question if those are actually the people that know as much about what they're doing as they should, and that you should be able to, not easily, but eventually find a place that is just yeah, I'm game for this, because it's literally it's just lines on paper is all it is. There's nothing technically different about it. It's just different lines.
Can I ask how many factories you've gone to?
4 so far.
So you just gotta you know what? You just gotta throw those lines out.
Remember 3
You'll
months.
get ahead. Well, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I thought
No, you
one or two would be normal.
No, you
You would actually have 4 or 5 options.
3 months of search. Yeah, just like he said, we just have to knock on more doors. I don't see how much anyone would not work with plus size. As long as you're paying them and you're not making some crazy pattern that's an too avant-garde, and why would they not take you? Yeah, just maybe you can also try before you go to call them and just say, hey, do you work with plus size garments?
I'll talk to you after.
Hi, thanks so much. I have a marketing question. I think we haven't addressed that yet, which is that you guys are, all based locally, and I work for a manufacturer that's also based in Brooklyn, manufacturing in Brooklyn, and I find that from a marketing standpoint, we spend a lot of time talking about made in Brooklyn, made in historic factory, employing, underserved populations, et cetera. How much time do you spend talking about your story and trying to set a part of your story, and how much time do you spend kind of just talking about your product and being like, this is the best cashmere shirt you can buy?
I don't think you can separate the two. Your product and your own story, these are mixed, and I think that you can produce whatever product you want as long as the root is the story of the brand and who you are, because it can manifest itself in so many different iterations. Okay?
Yeah. But I went to a lecture with some company called Do Lectures. He started a company called Hyatt Denim, and he said it's not really what you make; it's how well you tell your story. Your story, your brand, your item has to be good, but it's how well you can tell it. So.
I think also just a thought on this is, yeah, for us, we've spent a lot of time talking about our story. We're proud of the products that we make, and we're confident that products we make look good and appeal to people. But also, it also depends on who you are, what you do, and how many people around you do the same thing in your area. We're the only surfboard company in Brooklyn and Manhattan. So for us to stand out in terms of marketing to people, it's pretty easy because their selection is limited. But I think that the story that we've told about ourselves and our background has just appealed to people. So I guess we've focused mostly on the story. People, I think, buy into the product after they hear it.
And I would also just add that you're a business, so I think that it's always like, this is who I am and this is what I do. This is who I am and this is what I do. It's always that cadence because you'll have the opportunity to expand upon your line much broader because you only focus on that one product. It's just like, what is that company now doing making this product? But if they know who you are, find that that's oftentimes the best thing. When you see all these headphones, like even Beats by Dre, not that great of a product, but it's marketed like it's top of the line. So it's all about like who it is that's Dr. Dre behind it. We all know Dr. Dre. We all know and love Dr. Dre, and that's why we purchase the headphones. We have no question.
Hi, my question's from a lending perspective. I'm assuming that you guys have had investors for your businesses, and how have you approached them?
I have not, actually. We've made, it all happened, and this goes back to your question. It was a personal thing that I was doing for myself. I was just making surfboards because it was cheaper than buying them retail. I had more control, and I knew more about surfing and about surfboards than pretty much everybody around me, I guess. So I think winning people over in terms of the confidence that they had in me was easy for us to do right out of the gate, so we could start selling products and using that to pay for whatever costs that we were incurring along the way. But I would love to hear what you guys have to say about investors.
Yeah, so so I went into this now, I'd never done any manufacturing before. And soon realized how hard it was, and basically got to the point of where I'm never gonna go ask anyone for $1 until I'm entirely confident that I know what I'm doing. And that's like a real, you can get into a lot of trouble convincing yourself that you're ready for it when you're not. And I would actually argue that, the first year of the business where we, at any time had in most a few $1,000s in the bank account is the best way to run a business because you just have to make decisions. And if you go out, when I first started this, I was talking to a friend, and she goes, the only people that make fashion lines are people that get $1 million from their parents to just spend and lose all the money. And the point is that if you have $1 million, you're going to recklessly spend that money, even if you don't want to. And the thing is that this is one of the easiest things to spend money on because you'll go buy some fabrics and you're like, oh, these look nice. And then you'll buy them and then you'll never use them. And you do that over and over and over again. And you just spend tens of thousands of dollars and you don't even, you're not even a bad spender. You just did it and you don't even know what you did. And you look back and there's just a pile of stuff that you'll never use. And so, being constrained from a capital perspective is one of the biggest blessings you can have because you're forced to edit your collection. You're forced to make decisions about, my margin's gonna get killed on this. I just can't do it. And it's probably one of the best structural or restraints we can put on the business. And so we never thought about investors until we would get to the point of where we know what we're doing and we built such a kind of tight machine that we're at the point where we can ask someone, and we haven't done that yet. And so I think it's a really big cautionary tale about just going in. And the money's not hard to get. You can go get money, you can take loan, debt, equity, whatever it is. But you got to make a really good case that you need it and that you're not just if you have no reason, it becomes a curse. So that's the cautionary tale on investors.
I love that spin on it. I guess I was blessed for several years running on a shoestring budget, trying to start my business. But yeah, that's the same thing that I've done as well. It's a lot of bringing in eggs, from day to day. Yeah, so you're gonna be broke for a while, but you're blessed. All right. Any other question? We good? We good? Oh, we good.
Sorry, so my quick question was, You know, a lot of you guys mentioned persistence and knocking on doors. Could you put a number on like how many factories you actually did visit before you decided on one, just to make it more tangible?
There was so many during the 3 months I lost count. Probably 50 if I had to pick a number. I mean,
you went to 50?
Yeah. Combined with online and calling and knocking on doors, yeah, I'd say about. But like I said, I don't have the exact number from just 3 months of just going hard, trying to find a factory.
Yeah, I would say like at least 35, 40, 50. We would literally walk into buildings and look at kind of the I don't know what the technical term is, but literally just like the directory and the thing, and we would just ride the elevator up every floor and just walk in the factory and just see what's happening. But it's, the spin I would put on this is that it doesn't actually end. Like, you don't just like look for 30 factories, you pick one and then you're done. This was like a constant process for us of always wondering, like, what if there is something better out there? And like, I think this, like, fashion goes in these cycles of demand and just kind of access, and so factories are super, super busy, like 2 to 4 times a year, and then they're really quiet other times, and there'll be times where they just don't have time to do your stuff, and if you only have one spot, you're like in trouble. And so, like, I think the best way to approach this is you've never like found the perfect factory, you're always looking and looking and looking, because stuff changes. There are some factories that like have this one stitch that you need or that you want, or a button, a thing that says buttons, or like TV, or yeah, and so yeah, it's a never-ending process.
We're starting a men's line, so we haven't really gone through all of this like you guys have already, but it's been my experience so far to develop relationships with somebody that has a lot of experience in the industry and try to shortcut the smiling and dialing strategy. I think knocking on 50 doors, and sometimes you might be like referred by somebody that knows where Rag and Bone makes their clothes. You go and try that factory and it doesn't work out, so you have to go and find a new one. But there's definitely ways where you can like shortcut the search. I think it's just like getting to know people that are integrated in the industry really well.
Yeah, can I add one really quickly? Everyone says they work for theory, so theory means nothing. Like, you'll literally go to places and they'll be like, we do rag and bone theory and whatever, and every single place says that, and there's no way to like verify it, so like just pretend theory doesn't exist, and like find like brands you actually know and care about to work with, because like, it's just a weird thing. Like, they'll have like these logos of all these brands they've worked with, and it could have been, Rag and Bone's been around for 10, 15 years, so it could have been in 2003, and they're still saying that's our marquee client. So just be really careful.
I'm not making surfboards, but there are so few knitting mills in the New York metropolitan area. It's ridiculous. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, in 1998, there were 244 knitting mills in New York State. In 2011, there were 44. So take that number 44 and see who you know, like down the chain, and there might be 10 factories that I could call on that I could say, oh, so-and-so referred me. That's really not a lot. The knitwear industry in New York needs your business. Make sweaters.
Yeah, I would probably say for my first company where I was doing watches overseas, I probably contacted well over 150 manufacturers. But for the domestic line, it was probably a matter of maybe 20 to 30 manufacturers that I contacted. And the great thing about that was that these manufacturers oftentimes led me to the material suppliers, the pattern makers, all these sort of guys. So it helped me develop my own supply chain where I formed relationships with them. And I think that was probably the biggest blessing of starting to source domestically, because I knew every single person that was touching the product, versus when I was producing overseas, it was black box manufacturing. You have no idea on whether this manufacturer is producing everything, which you know it's not, or where these different components lie. One particular way, and this is my last spiel on producing abroad versus domestic, was not knowing who is involved in the supply chain is probably one of the most vulnerable states that you can be in, because with that one botched order from overseas, I knew that it was the tooler that was really the problem area in the supply chain. But that manufacturer refused to replace the tooler. So I had to pay for the setup costs. I had to either A, setup costs, and that was probably going to be about $20,000 worth of molds again, or just forget it. So I just said, you know what, overseas, forget it. I'm going to have to spend months out of the year overseas overseeing all of the production there, because that's what all the big guys do. They'll send a small team of guys overseas, or they'll have a QA specialist, but I didn't want to have to take that risk. So with that, is there any closing words that you guys want to leave? Any final words of advice?
Use Makers Row. It's really
Use
helpful.
Makers Row.
Can you talk more about the experience working with Makers Row and how it changed your business?
We should let a second. I want to go back to your question really quick, if that's okay. Talking about turning something that's a personal passion into a business. When it happened, it wasn't really planned for me. I was just doing what my instincts were telling me to do. I was making surfboards for myself, and friends started buying boards. But the way the company really started was when I found my initial partner, who was a friend of mine, and had a set of skills that I didn't have, and he was the one that really helped build the brand. So I guess, I think everybody needs help when they're starting a business. It's a big workload. If you're manufacturing something, you've got to be manufacturing it, but at the same time, as a growing company, you've got to build a brand, and that requires a ton of creative work. And you start with the obvious stuff. You start with Instagram. You compile the content that you want to reflect your look and feel as a company. You find help, you find your partner. For us, we built our website. That was, I think, the moment that we really felt legitimized. And all of this requires startup capital, but you're not going to be able to raise capital unless you build that foundation, that infrastructure first. So you start with the things that you can do, find some help. I think operating on a monthly budget like that it's the way that we operate, and I totally agree. And yeah, you just you do what you believe is right, what you know you're skilled at doing, and you tell that story at the same time, because people will be able to see that you're doing what you love to do, and it's genuine. So, yeah.
The one thing that I would say about starting off and only having like a little bit of capital to start off with, I think that it keeps you responsible because you only have very little to work with, but I think that if you can be responsible with large amounts of money, you can be responsible. You can lock it up, and put part of it away. I remember when I first got my family and friends round, which is always fun, asking family and friends for money to start a company. I got about $20,000. I said, all right, great. I'm gonna spend about 15 on manufacturing, maybe 5 on advertising, and that's pretty good. I can get a ton of products, and that's why it was very lopsided. But I think that even now, it's as long as you're budgeting and you're planning and you have goals and you have different allotments for your capital, I think that you can do it. You can have a large amount of money and still make it work.
I think it was actually a good thing that we didn't have like $1 million to tap into right away. Sure, it'd be great. Fantastic. But it forces you, budgeting yourself on a monthly basis, to build your grassroots marketing campaign, which everybody wants to see, is very important. You can buy, you can create your Google AdWords campaign and extend your reach, but nobody's gonna really buy into it or believe in you unless they've seen you kind of fight for it first. So I think it's great to have $1 million, you can buy whatever you want. But at the same time, when you're building your brand and doing all the things that you'll do in the early stages, you're laying all the brick. You're doing all that hard work that people that haven't had, let's say, have $1 million just lying around to start a company want to see you go through to. I think it just is, that's your street cred.
They'll just blow it on a PR firm and then come back like a year later and there's no money left. And so, like, one of the best things is literally not being able to hire a PR firm is, again, one of the best blessings because you just have to work for it. And the PR is just a little spike that happens every time they do some press thing. And if you kind of just accept that it doesn't exist, you can build like a really sustainable business off of that.
Guerrilla marketing works really well. Guerrilla marketing.
You want to?
No.
What is guerrilla marketing?
Okay. Guerrilla marketing. Well, it's basically like you called up your friend the editor. You did it yourself. You email them every week. That's guerrilla marketing. Guerrilla marketing could also be stoking a celebrity, making him wear a sweater, making him give your blanket to his wife and his baby. I might have done that, waiting for the results. So, yeah, that's it.
Restraining order.
Yes, just get started. You can talk and think about all you want. You could try to make a business plan as perfect as possible. But just get started. That way you'll eventually know the business plan and you'll know which way to go. You know, you could ask so many people in the industry how much this sample costs or how much this blogger costs or whatever, but you really gotta just get into it yourself and yeah, make some mistakes. And with that, you'll find out how the system is gonna go, what the costs are gonna be, you know, what market exactly you're gonna go into. Just get started. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, sacrifice some time, being patient. This is what you have to do.
Calculated risks, I think, are always the thing that I like. There's getting started, and then there's just like jumping into the deep end. I think, from my perspective, I think that one thing that's great about these panels is that we all have different perspectives on these types of things. I would say that taking calculated risks has always been a great thing for me, and even the guerrilla marketing style. I would always go to different concerts, different movie sets, and try to get my pieces, like my watches, on different celebrities, and that was probably the best way for me to get PR. I was able to get like Kanye West and Don Cheadle and all these great guys, because it's really interesting when if any of you guys are thinking about finding celebrities, it's a great way to get your product placed on them. Some guys are jerks, some guys are really cool, you never know. But as long as you figure out the right person to go to, which is never the celebrity directly, it's always the person that you see carrying the clipboard. That is the person that you want to talk to, because they're going to introduce you to them. And if you're not going out there looking for an autograph, you'll oftentimes find that you can give them gifts, and it just brightens up their day. For most people, I would say 90% of the celebrities and big name celebrities that I've run into and given products to have always been gracious, have always let me take pictures of them. Even like in some celebrities, like Don Cheadle, he asked for 2 more for his kids. So it's all about being able to find the right people and the person that's right underneath the person that you're actually trying to see. That's my advice as far as marketing and getting your products out on the right people, and I'm happy to answer any questions on that.
Yeah, you keep going, keep on going for finding that right person, and then things are just going to start actually coming to you. You know, in the beginning, I had to go knock on doors, try to find a photographer, go to random networking events, try to find models, try to find, contact new stores, see if stores are interested. I had to go through all this and keep on finding and contacting people. But nowadays, stylists are contacting me, bloggers are contacting me, factories are contacting me after they see my website and they Google me or whatever. And this, you go for the search in the beginning, you go persist and find the right people that you need, and things will just fall into place. But you just have to start going for it.
What has been the number one thing for you guys marketing-wise, the thing that's put your name out there is the most successful thing? What would you say? We'll wrap up on that question.
Well, Maker's Row was helped just being here, talking on the panel. I was on Rebecca Minkoff's blog, part of the She Can campaign, that really helped me out. Just little blurbs here and there that you get a little bit of a glimmer of hope, and then just keep going.
I can't really, I think that it's by saying yes a lot. When opportunities come your way, of course, being selective with the opportunities. You don't want to just, I guess, attach your name or let someone write a piece about you if it's not a source that you're proud of, I guess. So, yeah, I guess be selective with where you want to be seen. Yeah, hopefully whatever source it is that decides to give you exposure does a good job. I think that's it for me.
Yeah, we built a relationship with Orkins, which is a division of Complex, with a single reporter there, who was incredibly helpful and just like that guy, the person you go to every time you have something new. So that was a long-term one. The short-term one was we're lucky enough to have Beaver wear some stuff, and that was a good week.
There was a few different things. Blogs are one of them. Like getting onto Bond Magazine got me a lot more followers, and getting into the Magic Trade Show article got me a lot more followers. Also, doing some fashion shows. I've done some small fashion shows, like in the Tribeca Grand Hotel and a few other places. Chelsea Art Gallery. That's got me a lot of followers. And then platforms like being on 19th Amendment, and of course Maker's Row. Ever since we got into Maker's Row, we gained a lot more followers, especially when they had their store, and things like this.
All right. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully you'll be able to stay on a couple of minutes if anybody has any specific questions from here. And thank you all for coming out. Really appreciate it. Let's give it a round of applause.